The first time I saw the house, it was falling apart. The front steps sagged, the paint peeled like sunburnt skin, weeds choked the porch, every window had a story, most of them sad. Greg called it historic. His mother called it ours. I didn't say anything, I just walked through the front door, ran my fingers along the cracked walls and whispered to myself, I can fix this. And I did. For 15 years I gave everything I had to that house. Nights spent sanding floors until my hands blistered. Weekends staining cabinets, planting gardens, repairing gutters. I watched old wood come back to life under my fingers. I brought light into dark corners. I painted joy over silence. I poured myself into that place, not because anyone asked me to, because I thought I was building a home, a forever, a family. Greg never understood it. He said things like, you're wasting your time on this old place, or we could just hire someone. But I didn't want to hire anyone. This was my labor, my love. He worked late, traveled, watched football. Laughed with his sister on speakerphone while I stood in the hallway wiping dust from my arms. He was never cruel, just elsewhere. His parents, though, they saw me, especially his mom. She'd sit on a stool in the kitchen while I tiled the backsplash, humming to herself, watching me with soft eyes. You've given this house more heart than it ever had, she said once. It finally feels like someone lives here. I smiled and kept working. I didn't need praise, I just needed to be part of something. When she got sick, I took care of her. When she passed, I held Greg's hand through the funeral. 2 years later, when his father slipped into silence and stopped getting out of bed, I was the one who stayed, feeding him soup, cutting his nails, turning on his favorite music even when he didn't recognize it anymore. I didn't complain, not once, because I loved them, and because I believed that love meant I belonged. I never asked about the deed. It felt rude, cold, like asking someone to prove you mattered. The house was in his parents' name. After they passed, I assumed it became Greg's, but that didn't worry me. We were married, we'd built a life here. I had stained those stairs, grown herbs in that kitchen window. Watched snow fall through the attic skylight I installed with my own hands. This was my home. My skin lived in these walls, so when the betrayal came, it didn't arrive like thunder. It came quiet, like a whisper through a locked door. It started with strangers in the yard, 2 men in dress shirts, one with a clipboard, the other snapping photos with his phone. They were walking the property, stepping carefully over my flower beds like they didn't see them. I opened the front door and called out, "Can I help you?" One of them looked up, polite but distant. Greg said we could take measurements, we're preparing the listing. Word sank like a stone. Listing, I stood there frozen. My hands still damp from washing breakfast dishes, the smell of coffee clung to my sleeves. I think there's a mistake, I said. He glanced down at his papers. This is 218 Hazelwood Drive, right? I nodded slowly. He gave me a tight smile. No mistake. I watched them circle the house, my house. Every step they took felt like an erasure. Greg came home that evening like nothing had happened. He tossed his keys in the bowl by the door, kicked off his shoes and said, "Hey, what's for dinner?" I didn't answer. I stood in the hallway, arms crossed, the silence stretching between us like wire. Who were those men? I asked. He paused. Turned. What men? The ones taking pictures for the listing. He rubbed the back of his neck. Oh, that. I stared at him. He walked into the kitchen, opened the fridge. I meant to tell you, he said, I got a great offer. It doesn't make sense to stay in this house anymore. It's too big, too old. Too big, too old. I gripped the back of a chair to stay upright. You sold the house. Not yet, but close, just paperwork at this point. I blinked. You didn't tell me. I just did. No, I said, voice cracking. You made a decision without me. He turned, arms spread like it was nothing. It's my house, Marla. I felt my heart slide into my stomach. You didn't think I deserved a conversation. He scoffed. Come on, you've been miserable here for years. That's when I realized he had no idea who I was anymore, or maybe he never did. He sat down at the table, pulled a folder from his briefcase and slid it toward me. Inside was a printed contract, typed paragraphs, bold lines, a number circled in blue ink. This is your portion, he said. I think it's more than fair. I didn't touch it. I looked at him, this man I'd shared a bed with for over a decade, and asked, what do you think this house is to me? He didn't answer. Do you know what it took to make it livable? But I gave up to keep it from falling apart. He sighed. You wanted to do those things. The knife went in clean. You never asked for help, he added. You made it your project. My project, I whispered, not our home. His face was blank, and in that emptiness I saw everything. He had never seen this as ours, just his and me, temporary. I walked outside, barefoot on the porch I'd sanded myself, past the chairs I repainted every spring, down the steps I once thought would lead to a life. I stood in the garden, the one I built from nothing, and I wept, not because I was surprised, but because part of me had always known I didn't take the deal. The number in the folder meant nothing to me. Not because it wasn't enough, though it wasn't, but because it came from the wrong place, a place of erasure, a place that said you were useful but you were never real. Greg didn't argue, didn't plead. Just said, suit yourself, and left the folder on the table like a tip I refused to accept. I sat with it for a long time, looking at the ink, thinking of the nights I went to bed with paint in my hair and aching knees, believing I was building a life worth staying in. 2 days later, Greg handed me a set of moving boxes. Not with cruelty, with efficiency, like he was doing me a favor. I'll be gone all weekend, he said, figured that would be easier. He kissed my cheek before walking out the door. I didn't flinch. But after it closed, I stood still for a long time, listening to the silence, trying to decide what was mine. I packed slowly, not furniture, not dishes, not shared things, just the parts that held memory in a way Greg never could. The ceramic bowl his mother made with her own hands, the paintbrush I used on every room, a photo faded, unframed, of me kneeling in the garden, dirt on my chin, sunlight in my hair. He never took that picture. His mother did. She wrote on the back, "This is what love looks like." I wrapped it in a towel and placed it at the top of the box. On Sunday, I walked through each room one last time. The bedroom with creaky floors I nailed back into place. The bathroom I rattled after weeks of watching videos and burning through 3 sets of gloves. The hallway I painted a soft green because Greg said he liked calm colors but never noticed when it changed. The attic. I almost didn't go up there, but I did. The skylight I installed was still there, still catching the light, still waiting for someone to look up. I sat beneath it, cross-legged on the old rug, and let the sun pour over me, and I cried. Not because I was leaving, but because I had stayed so long hoping to be chosen. That night I didn't sleep. I placed one final note on the kitchen table, not for Greg, for the house. Thank you for holding me when no one else did. I hope someone loves you like I tried to. Then I walked out the front door. No keys, no folder, no goodbye, just me, a box, and the version of myself I was finally ready to carry forward. I didn't go far. Just 2 towns over, a quiet place with narrow streets and chipped sidewalks, an apartment above a florist's shop where the windows fogged in the morning and the air smelled like lavender and wet leaves. The landlady's name was Ruth. She was in her 70s and wore thick glasses and bright red lipstick even when taking out the trash. "You look like someone starting over," she said the day I moved in. I smiled. "Is it that obvious?" She handed me the key. "It's always obvious. Welcome home." Those 2 words cracked something in me. Home, not his house, not their walls, mine, even if just for now. The apartment was small, slanted ceiling, 1 bedroom, no dishwasher, but it had sunlight. And silence that didn't accuse me of anything. I unpacked the bowl, the photo, the paintbrush, placed them carefully on a shelf, not to display pain, to honor survival. I found a job at a local hardware store, part-time, minimum wage. But familiar, the smell of sawdust and metal grounded me. Customers came in with broken faucets and splintered chairs, and I showed them how to make things whole again. No one knew who I was, no one asked. It felt good to exist without history. On Wednesdays, I walked past a community center. A whiteboard near the door always read something different. 1 week, write the story only you can tell. Another, sometimes the rebuild is stronger than the original. One day, I stopped in. The woman at the desk offered me tea, asked if I needed anything. I said, just a room where I don't owe anyone an explanation. She smiled. "You found it." They had a writing circle on Thursday nights. 10 chairs, mismatched mugs, people who looked like they'd been cracked open and put back together, 1 line at a time. I didn't speak at first, I just listened. A man read a poem about forgiving a brother who never said sorry. A woman shared an essay about cleaning out her mother's house after she passed, finding things she wished she'd been told. They didn't speak with bitterness. They spoke like people who had bled and learned how to keep walking anyway. That first night I walked home with a notebook in my coat pocket, blank, but full of something I hadn't felt in a while, beginning. I opened it just before bed, wrote one line: "He sold the house, but he never owned my heart." I underlined it twice, then closed the notebook and slept, not deeply but without flinching. Weeks passed in a quiet rhythm: work, tea, writing group, walks around the neighborhood where no one expected anything from me. I started sleeping through the night, not always, but enough to feel like something inside me had unclenched. I added curtains to the window, painted the chipped edge of the kitchen table a soft blue, bought a second mug just because I liked the pattern. No one else drank from it, but it made me smile. Sometimes healing doesn't roar. It arrives slowly in the sound of your own breath not breaking. In writing group, I started reading, not the whole truth, not yet, just fragments. Sentences about a woman sanding her fingerprints into the wood of a house she would never own. About a man who mistook silence for stability, about love that wasn't love, just obligation with a softer tone. No one interrupted. No one needed the full story to understand the ache. When I finished, a woman across the room said softly, "I did that too, for 12 years. We didn't speak again that night, but when we passed each other in the parking lot, she nodded. And I knew being seen doesn't always require a spotlight. Sometimes it's just a quiet echo. That weekend, I visited a flea market on the edge of town. I wasn't looking for anything, but I found a frame, rough wood, slightly crooked. Hand-carved, it reminded me of the front porch rails I used to sand every spring. I bought it. Back home, I placed the photo inside, the one of me in the garden, dirt on my face, sun in my eyes. I set it on the shelf next to the bowl, the paintbrush, and the notebook, my museum of proof, not for visitors, for me, to remember that even if the house is gone, the woman who built it is still here. A letter came in the mail. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting. Greg. I stood at the kitchen counter holding the envelope like it might burn. It didn't. Inside was a single line: "Hope you're well. I regret how it ended." That was it. No apology. No acknowledgement, just a line that probably made him feel better without changing a thing. I didn't respond. I didn't throw it away either. I tucked it into the back of the notebook, behind all the words that carried more weight. Then I made tea, watched the steam rise, and told myself the truth. Regret is not the same as repair, and silence is sometimes the clearest answer. March brought rain. Gentle at first, then heavier, sheets of water that blurred the windows and soaked the streets. Everything smelled like earth and electricity. I started leaving the window cracked at night, just enough to hear it. The sound comforted me. It reminded me I wasn't made of glass, that storms pass, that some things can wash away without needing to be scrubbed clean. I added more lines to my notebook, short ones, honest: "You don't owe anyone, you're staying. Love without safety is just survival in disguise." I was loyal, he was legal, and only one of those mattered in court. Every word felt like reclaiming something, not from Greg, from myself. One evening after group, the woman who'd said "I did that too" asked if I wanted to get coffee. Her name was Elise. She used to be a dental hygienist. Gave it up to help her ex build a business she never owned. We sat by the window of a small cafe, 2 mugs between us, 2 lives that used to be smaller than they should have been. "I thought if I gave enough," she said, "he'd see me as essential." I nodded. I thought the same. He looked down. He said I never asked to be included. I sighed. Mine said I did it for me. We laughed, not because it was funny, because we were still here, because we had found each other on the other side of betrayal, not as broken women, but as survivors who knew their worth had never been a negotiation. That night, I walked home in the rain without an umbrella, let it soak into my sweater, let it drip from my hair, let it remind me of the porch I used to scrub after storms, of the gutters I cleared while Greg scrolled his phone in the living room. Let it rinse away every piece of me that still thought love had to be earned with sacrifice. At home, I toweled off, lit a candle, opened the notebook and wrote, "He let go of a woman who would have stayed forever." And I finally let go of the woman who thought she had to. I closed it, set it gently on the shelf beside the photo, and for the first time since the house, I danced just a little, just in my socks, just because I could. Spring fully arrived all at once. Trees burst open with green, sidewalks warmed, Neighbors started planting again, kneeling beside flower beds with soft eyes and hopeful hands. I bought tulips at the market, yellow ones. Put them in a chipped glass jar on the kitchen table. They didn't last long, but that was okay. Not everything beautiful needs to stay. At the hardware store, I started teaching Saturday workshops, basic home repairs. How to patch drywall, fix a leaky faucet, reseal windows. It started with 2 people, then 5, then a dozen, mostly women, mostly quiet. But their eyes held the same fire I remembered in mine, people who had waited for someone else to fix things until they decided they could do it themselves. We laughed a lot, screwed things in crooked, started over, got our hands dirty. It felt like church, only without the shame. One afternoon, a woman stayed after class. She was older, maybe 60, soft voice, steady hands. She said, "Thank you, I was married 30 years, he never let me touch a hammer, said it wasn't ladylike." I smiled, "You're holding that hammer just fine now." She nodded, "I didn't know I could still start over." I looked at her. Really looked. "Starting over doesn't mean beginning from nothing," I said. "It means beginning from experience." She wiped her eyes. "Then I'm not starting over, I'm starting smarter." That night, I wrote her words in my notebook. I didn't hear from Greg again, no calls, no letters, no surprise knocks on the door, and I stopped expecting them, stopped looking for closure from the same place that wounded me. Some things don't end with apology, they end with absence. And peace grows in that space. Elise and I kept meeting for coffee, then lunch, then long walks. We didn't talk about our past every time, we talked about what we wanted to build next. She signed up for an online class. I told her about my dream of opening a tiny repair shop just for women, no condescension, no judgment, no "you should know this already." Just a space to rebuild houses and selves. "Do it," she said, "I'd come." Her belief felt like sunlight. One Sunday morning I sat by the window with tea in hand. The light hit just right. The tulips were gone, but the jar still sat there, still holding space, still ready for whatever came next. I opened the notebook, wrote, "Maybe I was never meant to keep that house. Maybe I was meant to learn that I was the home all along." And I closed it, smiled, and went out into the day. The repair shop started small. A rented garage on the edge of town, concrete floors, flickering lights, a dented metal sign I painted by hand, "Fix It Friday for Women by Women." At first it was just Elise and me. She brewed coffee. I taught people how to hold a drill. We posted on the community board on Facebook on the front door of the florist's shop beneath my apartment. The first class had 4 women, one brought her daughter, one brought a broken chair. All brought quiet hope. They held tools like they weren't sure they were allowed to. By the end of the hour they were laughing, something uncoiled in their shoulders. And I felt it too, the quiet shift from "can I" to "I just did." I kept the space open 3 evenings a week. No appointments, no judgment. People came in with leaky faucets, crooked frames, cabinet doors that stuck. Sometimes they asked for help. Sometimes they just wanted to be somewhere they didn't have to apologize for not knowing. I understood that deeply. I had spent years apologizing for taking up space in a house that was supposed to be mine. This space, it was different. It didn't ask for permission. It welcomed presence. Elise made flyers with her niece's help. She called them empowerment in paper form. We laughed, but she was right. What we were building wasn't just skills, it was recovery, one nail at a time. One Thursday, a woman walked in with a familiar face. Her name was Dana, Greg's sister. She stood in the doorway, uncertain, holding a torn screen window. I felt my stomach tighten. She smiled nervously. "I heard this was your shop. I wasn't sure if I should come." I didn't speak for a moment. Then I said, "Everyone's welcome here." She exhaled and crossed the threshold. We didn't talk about Greg, we talked about the screen, the tools, the weather. After we fixed it, she lingered, then said softly, "He shouldn't have done it like that." I nodded, "No, he shouldn't have. I'm sorry I didn't say anything sooner." "You just did." She looked at me, then said something that caught me off guard. "I can see you better now." I smiled, "That makes 2 of us." That night I wrote, "Some people return not to stay, but to witness, and that too is healing." I closed the notebook, ran my fingers over the paint-stained table, and felt more grounded than I ever had in that perfect old house. Because this time, the walls were mine, the work was mine, the freedom was mine, and I didn't have to ask anyone to stay. The shop filled up faster than I expected. Wednesdays were for woodwork, Fridays for plumbing basics. Saturdays became storytelling. It wasn't official. No schedule, no sign-up sheet. But women stayed late after repairs were done. We sat on upside-down buckets or folding stools, sipping lukewarm tea, sharing more than just tips. One talked about the husband who moved out and left behind only debt and a sink that wouldn't stop leaking. Another shared how she'd built a shed by herself after her brothers said she couldn't. We clapped. Not because the stories were perfect, but because they were true. We weren't fixing just homes. We were reclaiming pieces of ourselves, nail by nail. I started keeping a new notebook in the shop. One where women could write something before they left, a tip, a memory, a line of truth. I called it the Ledger of Strength. Some wrote long letters, some left just a word. Survived. Rebuilt. Next time it's mine. I read every single one. And every time I did, I felt less alone in what I'd lost and more steady in what I was becoming. Greg never came. I didn't expect him to, but his name came up once. A woman new to town asked, "Are you related to that guy who sold the Hazelwood place?" I paused, smiled, "No, not anymore." She didn't push, just nodded. That was the last time I said his name. Elise painted a mural on the back wall of the garage. It was a house, but made of hands, holding each other, lifting each other. In the middle, she painted a key. When I saw it, I had to look away for a second. Because that's what I had been looking for all along. Not a house, a place that didn't lock me out. That Sunday I went back to Hazelwood. I don't know why, maybe to prove I could, maybe to see if the house remembered me. It was freshly painted, new shutters, someone had put wind chimes by the front porch. I stood across the street, didn't cry, didn't ache, just breathed. It was someone else's now, and for the first time that felt right, I walked back home. My real home, the apartment with the soft light and the tulip jar and the tools stacked neatly in the corner. I made tea, sat by the window, opened the shop's ledger, and wrote, "I gave everything to a house that forgot me. Now I build where I'm not just welcome but wanted." I set the book down and let the day end in peace. The shop marked its 1-year anniversary in May. We didn't throw a big party. Just opened the doors like always, brewed stronger coffee, set out a tray of lemon cookies Elise baked the night before. At noon, women started trickling in, some regulars, some faces I hadn't seen in months. They brought their stories with them. One had finally fixed her roof. One had left a man who never listened. One was building a greenhouse from scrap wood piece by piece. We laughed, we cried. We passed around a roll of duct tape like it was a trophy. It was perfect. It was real. Later that night, after the tools were put away and the last goodbye faded out the door, I stayed behind, sat in the middle of the shop floor. The mural wrapped around me, the words from the ledger echoed in my mind. The air was thick with what we had built, not just shelves and benches but belonging. I closed my eyes and whispered, "Thank you." Not to Greg, not to the old house. To myself, to the woman who walked away with nothing but a photo, a paintbrush, and the strength to begin again. Back at the apartment, I brewed tea and pulled out my first notebook, the one that held the beginning. The one with smudged corners and pages that carried more truth than any contract ever could. I turned to the first page. He sold the house, but he never owned my heart. And then I turned to the last blank page, picked up a pen. Wrote, "They called it walking away, but I know now. It was walking home." I closed the cover slowly, not with sadness, with certainty, because I had built something. Something that no one could list, no one could sign away, no one could take, not a house, not a name, but a life, one where I didn't ask to stay because I belonged from the beginning, and this time I had the key.